Hello again and welcome to American Dream Time. I am Robert Doc Barham and here with my co-host, Mr. Ben Cooke. Ben, say hello.
Hello.
Hey, Ben, I know you and I have talked a little bit in the last week or so about our guest today, who's also on the air. I want to welcome Chris Speyrer here, professional stand-up comedian and comedy club owner. Hey, Chris.
Hey, Doc. I'm checking in from Mason City, Illinois.
Hey, thanks for showing up today. Chris, so that our listeners know, tell us just a little bit about you. I just mentioned that you're a professional stand-up comedian. When did you get started as a stand-up comedian?
I started the second Tuesday of 1989. Went to an open mic just to watch the first weekend before that, Tuesday before that, and 8 of the 10 people were pretty bad. And I was like, I'd been thinking about doing it for a while, done some public speaking. So I got up that second Tuesday of 89. I was able to get a paid gigs later that year. So I've been doing it professionally since 89. My dad owned a small business, a printing business. So that always helped because I had hours, that were pretty flexible and I could get away for road gigs. And plus I did a lot of comedians promo too when they were passing through town.
Well, Chris, do you remember when you first started thinking about becoming a professional stand-up comedian? Was it when you were a kid?
I was a fan. My brother was 4 years older than me. The first album I remember was Steve Martin, "Let's Get Small," which Steve Martin was a rock star of a comedian before he made the transition to movies, and that was the first instance. And there was a bar that was right behind my parents' house. There was a kind of a little strip mall with a grocery store and a bar called Clancy's, and there was a local performer named Dow Thomas, D-O-W.
Oh, yeah, Dow Thomas. I worked with him a number of times. Guitar
and performed there, and it was like $2 to get in. Pitcher of beer is $5. You get a steak sandwich for $5, and I could literally go out the back door, hop a fence, and be home. And that's back then in Ohio. You could drink when you were 18 if it was the watered down beer. So that was my first exposure to live stand up. And again, I did some public speaking in college and some internships. I had to go to I was pitching the Red Cross summer program to grade schoolers. So I had to go out to grade schools and do the slideshow. So that kind of helped me get over the stigma of being in front of people. But and a comedy speech in college that went over well. And then at my last exam, somebody gave me the passes to see the open mic. And that's when I first went out there and saw my first open mic. So after the show, I signed up for the following week. It went really well. And the job search went nowhere, by the way. I was trying to get into public relations, And,
you were trying to get into public relations?
Yeah, that was my English major. I had some writing skills. My dad was a printer, so I did some typesetting. So I had the background for it for sure. But the job search really went nowhere, or everything paid like an internship, even though I had graduated. So when I started getting hired in comedy, and my dad still had a business, of course. So that was the path I took, and it was the right path. I think.
Well, Chris, you probably don't know this about me because we're just getting to know each other. I'm sorry, Leonard.
Yeah. I should explain that. Jeff. My business card has my name, Chris Speyrer, and underneath, it's in parentheses, it says pronounced Leonard Skinner. So you got to be a certain age to get that joke and know the album. But Ben, I know that's your background, correct? Public relations.
Yeah, and I own my own company. So if you're ever looking for a job, send me a resume. But in the meantime, tell us, how does one land themselves in Mason City, Illinois, of all places, with a comedy club that has seen household names?
Well, interesting story. My neighbor is one of my best friends. He was a comedian named Dr. Gonzo. He opened for a lot of rock bands. In fact, my brother saw him in '84 opening for Huey Lewis long before I did stand-up. I asked him about how the concert was, and he mentioned this guy opened the show. It was really funny. Now, he's my neighbor. How about that? But he grew up here. His dad was a town doctor. Went to college at Drake in Iowa, ended up in Frisco, and that's where he did comedy for 15, 16 years. Moved back here, right about 1990. I worked with him probably about 91 or 92. at a place called the Columbus Funny Bone, which is a Tuesday through Sunday. You stay in the same apartment, you get to know each other. So we got along great, and I was doing a lot of gigs from Dayton. I was driving out to like Omaha or Rapid City or Kansas City, so it was a good halfway point. So I started dropping off, either coming or going, just to break up the drive. And we actually did a few comedy shows long before he had opened some restaurants later on, but long before that, when Gonzo was still doing road work, there's a political comedian named Will Durst.
Yeah, San Francisco.
He's a good friend of Gonzo's, a good friend of mine, and his wife Debbie is in an improv troupe with Deb and Mike. And we did about 4 shows over here, usually on July 4th, because Will would be back to do the Milwaukee festival up there, Summerfest. So he'd come down here about the same time. So we did several shows here long before, the comedy club or the restaurants were a thing. But eventually Gonzo got out of comedy, bought one of the existing restaurants on our block here, and redid it. It was kind of a countertop operation. So he made it a really nice sit-down restaurant. Then he bought the building next to him, which was another crappy building, turned it into a nice steakhouse. And I was in and out for this whole process, and eventually he pitched me, hey, why don't you open a comedy club next to the steakhouse? And his brother owned the building, and it was the same thing. It was a crappy building, but I had seen the before and after in the 2 buildings that were renovated. So I knew it was possible. And everything turned out great as far as the construction goes. It took a little bit longer than I thought, but that's how the genesis of me getting here was. And, the blessing with Gonzo was kind of a West Coast guy, and I was more of a Midwest guy. So between us, we knew a lot of comedians, so.
Uh-huh.
So in fact, he's got a couple really good friends he didn't know, or now that he didn't know until I opened the comedy club. So people like Haywood Banks, and we just had Todd Yon here again. Todd's this old road dog who just got out of retirement to come over last weekend. So, again, the relationships is really what helped me sustain this, because I would say 90% of the comics who worked here initially, it's because I had worked with them previously, or Gonzo knew them specifically. So I think that's really helped me. Instead of going through an agency or finding them on the website and going, hey, I'd like to have so-and-so. It's like, oh, yeah, I worked with them in Nashville. Let me give them a call, and that way I can usually get around the agents and all that, because I have a personal relationship with most of the comics.
Yeah, it's nice to be able to maintain that many relationships over a long period of time like that with the stand-up comedians. My experience over the years as doing professional stand-up comedian is most of the comedians are pretty nice guys.
Yeah, I think we have a lot in common. I mentioned the English major. There's a lot of comedians that are English or journalism majors. Well, journalism and comedy have a lot in common. You're going out and seeing things and reporting back to an audience of some sort. So I found that there's been a lot of comedians with a similar background to me, English or journalism.
Chris, what does it take to become a stand-up comedian at your club? Is there a process? Do you have a space at your club for people who are interested in becoming stand-up comedians or doing stand-up comedy?
Oh, yeah. Well, we do an open mic usually about once a month, maybe about 10 a year, I'd say, probably. But there's a lot of stage time around us in that regard. So, and I'm not opposed to giving guest spots to comics. Now I'm just doing one show a night. So you could do a guest spot or two and not wreck the whole, we got to turn the room for this late show, so we haven't had to worry about that. So I'm probably a little bit more flexible as far as getting newer people on stage, as long as I've seen him before. And, other comics, in the stable will kind of, hey, you should see this guy. I've seen him a couple times, does really well. Okay, bring him out, and I'm pretty much an open door if there's a couple of people I trust who've seen you before. But again, we've had a really strong stable of comics who I've seen from their first couple times on stage that are now, legitimately could be on any show or move on to much bigger things from the area. So, it's a good place to start. Dayton was a great place to start because within a 5-hour radius, there was a ton of paid gigs. And I think the same thing kind of applies here. We're halfway between St. Louis, Chicago, Indianapolis is 3 hours. Quad Cities is a couple hours. I mean, there's a lot of gigs.
Oh, Quad Cities is only a couple hours, really.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, there's a lot of stage time and a lot of scenes you can get to in a reasonable amount of time. That's really what helped me. And when I started in Dayton, there were so many gigs that were easy drives. I eventually did get out to, South Dakota or whatever, North Dakota, but Colorado. But it was one of those things that really helped you get better faster. And another thing that, I mentioned the Tuesday, Sunday thing in Columbus. There's not too many clubs doing more than Friday, Saturday now. So when you start as a comic, when we started, and you emceed at the Columbus Funny Bone, you did 9 shows in a week.
Yeah. But they start on Tuesday. They start on Tuesday night, right?
Yeah, Tuesday.
And wrap it up on Sunday.
Friday and 3 Saturday.
Yeah.
So you got on stage a ton, and even the smaller rooms like Wiley's was Wednesday through Saturday. You did 6 shows. Joker's the same thing, Wednesday through Saturday with an open mic on Tuesday. So I mean, but nowadays clubs are pretty much Friday, Saturday.
2 shows Friday, 2 shows Saturday, mostly that sort of thing, or one show.
Zany's in downtown Chicago. I had the GM's a friend of mine, Brian Hicks, and they've been doing the TikTok people on the weekdays. And he says those people that come out to see him aren't really comedy club patrons, and the TikTok people aren't really funny, but it's more of a celebrity worship kind of thing. So they'll do those things on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and then get back. And that's a very established club. That's the oldest club in Illinois, So, I mean, but most clubs, Friday and Saturday, maybe an occasional Thursday, maybe a Sunday, but, it's a lot harder to get those paid gigs, those weekly gigs where you could actually, make a little bit of a living. Now you have to have, I got a one-nighter here, and I got a weekend here, and then I got a Saturday here and a Friday there, and you're doing maybe 8 shows in 2 months instead of 9 shows in a week.
So what is it, Ben? What about you? Have you ever done any stand-up comedy before?
I think we both know the answer to that, Doc. Despite your urgings and persistence over that, the closest I got was you were like, you should write some of this crap down and go find an open mic somewhere.
I think that sounds like my poetic voice, this crap.
And then I'm paraphrasing. And then the pandemic hit, and then I had a kid, and, it's just like, as you said, I just keep coming up with excuses, creating life and global pandemic aside. Those are pretty good excuses, I would say.
Well, you are originally from where? What state? What city?
Me?
From the Bend?
Yeah, Bend.
Oh, yeah.
Oh. Central Wisconsin. So just one mid-state journey away from Chris.
Just a couple dozen cornfields, probably.
Yeah. Many cornfields, but central Wisconsin.
How far are you from Appleton and say Madison and Green Bay?
I'd say Appleton is sort of in between those two, but I was born. They call them the Fox Cities. There's a Lake Winnebago, which has nothing to do with the RV, unfortunately, and I believe
is with the Winnebago tribe.
Yeah, it was like it was a name given them by a neighboring tribe, and I believe it means people of the stinky water, because the lake often smells like fish. And so I was born right near there, in a town called Neenah.
If you win the prize of Miss Winnebago, that's not a good thing necessarily, I guess.
Probably not. You don't want to be. Yeah.
You said Mina?
Neenah.
Uh-huh.
Eena. It's all Native American names up there. Everything.
And you still have family there, right?
I do, yes.
And
Oshkosh.
How often do you get back? You live in LA now. How often do you get back to Wisconsin?
Oh, we try to get up there about once a year.
Yeah, man.
When are you headed back again?
Well, we were there over the summer, which is hands down the best time to go. which pretty much just lasts the month of July. And then, we've been back a few times during the holidays. Autumn in the Midwest is spectacular. With the leaves changing color and everything. The winter months tend to be a little bit brutal. I think Chris is in the midst of that right now.
Yeah, we don't get quite the snow that you guys get. We get a little wind down here more than anything. But I've been up there during the winter months.
So, but Ben, when are you headed back?
My cousin who's a firefighter in Madison texted me the other day. It was 20 below zero.
Wow.
Yeah.
In Madison. When are you? I'm going to stay with this. When are you going back?
We got to figure out our next trip. Probably next summer. We were there for 4th of July last summer. We'll probably plan something similar again next summer.
Oh, good.
I'm just trying to get through Christmas right now as of this recording. So.
Okay. Hey, Chris, when Ben's there in the summertime, can you make a phone call so that he'll be able to go on stage in Madison or Green Bay?
Oh, yeah. I have a couple.
Here we go again.
Yeah, man. I know a guy who knows a guy. Yeah.
I'm sure something will happen, like a global economic collapse or some other calamity that will prevent me from pursuing this.
Well, I'll say
we can give it a shot.
We might have a better experience your first time in the Midwest than in LA, because for one thing, you're likely to get a longer set. Sometimes in those big cities, they give you like 3 minutes on an open mic, which is tough to be funny in 3 minutes. Typically in my open mic, it's like I light them at 6. I get them 6 to 8 if they're comfortable with that much time. And that's a little bit, to me, that's more an appropriate time for you can actually be funny and grow a little bit and get your jokes out. 3 minutes.
I have an awesome question I wanted to ask both of you.
All right.
What makes a good joke? A stand-up, in particular, for stand-up, you've got a certain amount of time. You've got only so much material you can get through. 3 minutes isn't a lot of time unless I'm doing a plank.
Again, that's in the Midwest. You'd have a little bit more time, I would think. Than in LA or Chicago, you have 30 comics that show up at an open mic, and they make the mistake of getting everybody up on stage instead of kind of picking and choosing. But I kind of like the misdirection. Doc and I talked about a comedian named Emo Phillips who was just here, but one of those guys who has a weird enough premise, and you think you know where it's going, and then suddenly it's a left turn out of nowhere that hits you in the back of the head. Those kind of jokes. Yeah,
like his joke that he has about, I'm paraphrasing, but I wake up every morning and enjoy a piping hot, fresh pot of coffee. Oh, I've tried other enemas.
Yeah, he's genius.
And I think his joke that he has, the joke that he has about religion, which I can't remember that joke, but the joke he has about religion where two people meet.
Yeah, that's something you really have to look up on YouTube. That is
a brilliant piece.
Actually voted like the best joke ever.
Yeah.
He's got so many. He does this joke about my date got upset because I didn't open the car door for her. Instead, I just floated up to the surface.
I want to keep plugging away at this because there's a craft to this, right? And as an outsider, again, I kind of see a few different. There's like guys who do like sort of one-liner jokes, like Stephen Wright, right? He's just got books filled with little things that just make you chuckle because they're.
Yeah, again, you never see the punchline coming, for one thing. He's another personal favorite.
But then you've got like these commentary guys or slice of life, like more story, developing.
Or more of a rant structure. Bill Bird has a lot of rants, but you're not right. There's some are like storytellers.
Jerry Seinfeld, Carlin, these guys are going on and on. I mean, they're funny and entertaining and engaging, but it's a very different structure.
Yeah, it's long form, I'd say.
And open mic is not the way to test something like that.
No, but I think Doc said to get a notebook, and that's always a good thing. Not that you not that everything you write down is going to be a winner, but if you don't write it down, there's a good chance you might not remember it. And of course, I think Doc and I have all had this experience where we write down a joke and maybe forget about it and then revisit your notebook and then kind of figure it out maybe a year or two down the line,
Well, for me, Ben, when I was a kid, what worked for me right off the bat was memorizing other people's jokes, specifically watching stand-up comedy on television and remembering those jokes and then telling those jokes. And with some of the comedians, I went so far as to try to mimic them, like to do mimicry of their voices and their style and their body language and things. Just try to become like them. But I agree with Chris. Misdirection is probably at the core of most jokes and most stand-up comedy. And I've often talked to stand-up comedians who are also magicians, and they really understand it because misdirection is such an important part of so much stage magic. But usually from what I learned, is the basic sections of a joke are the premise, what it's about. That's just step one. And then there's the setup, which is an extension of the original premise. And that extension of the original premise, which is very general, then becomes more specific. So it's essentially leading you in a direction of thought. And then there's the punchline, and that you could say that between the setup and the punchline, there is a place where you choose a point to go off into another direction that is unexpected by the recipient, the listener, the audience, which ends up being the punchline. So does that make sense?
It does. I guess maybe you kind of go off the rails or you go in an unexpected direction, but it still has to make sense, right? Like,
oh yeah. You have to have something that's relatable for sure.
That has to tie back into oh, I see what he did there or she did there.
Another technical term is a tagline, which, once you get them laughing, you basically come up with other punchlines, because once you have them laughing, it's easier to keep them laughing than to start from a cold start again, another premise. So, you would see a lot of comedians just hit a joke and then tagline, another joke, another punchline, like 3 or 4 punchlines right in a row. And that's a process. Sometimes you'll write the original joke and you won't have a tagline, and you might do it, and a friend of yours go, "Hey, you should tag that with this," Yeah. Another a technical term is the callback, where you might make a reference of your appearance early in your set, and then at the end of your set, you might bring that back and as another joke where, "Oh, you did that joke earlier," So, and those come with experience and being on stage a lot. But the taglines is a very very good advice, because, again, once you have them laughing, keep them laughing. Cosby, before all his trouble, was a master guy who would just tag things to death.
Yeah.
And I'm more of a 3 and move on. Comedy is in 3s. So I usually do about 3 and then move on.
Dom Herrera is exceptionally good at tagging things out continuously, repeatedly, almost to the point where the series of tags are connected in such a way that it becomes like a story that he's telling, which I really like that way of doing it. I think that
is it still sort of true that there's this whole aspect, right, of comedians will go on the road to clubs like yours, Chris, and around the country, testing out material, see what bombs, see what lands, and then sort of on their way to perfecting. Maybe this is reserved for some of the really big guys, like if they're prepping for a Netflix special or something, right? They're going to go and stress test these things, A/B test their material until they sort of perfect the final act, and then they'll run with that for a year. Or is that still sort of the case?
Well, and the famous showbiz slogan is, "If it plays in Peoria, it'll play nationwide." That's probably a vaudeville term from way back when. But you're right. You want to get in front of a lot of different audiences and make a lot of different people laugh. And that's also when you're first starting. I find that I try to sympathize with the people who are getting out of the local stable and are making an effort to, hey, I'm going to do this competition in Ohio. Hey, I'm going to I'm going to go to this festival in Iowa. You know, people that are making an effort to get out beyond their comfort zone because, you know, a lot of these new guys do the same room every time. And it's like you need to find, you know, a mixture of audiences that you can entertain. So, you know, if a joke works on all those audiences, you know, you could travel nationwide or be worthy of a special, like you said. But, you know, some of these guys do the same open mic and then they start playing to the back of the room and trying to make their buddies laugh instead of crafting an act that's a paid audience is going to laugh at.
Yeah, that's the too hip for the room phrase, which can be real trouble sometimes. I think that as you get more mature, as you grow older, well, not necessarily older, but as you mature as a person, you recognize how much the audience is your friend and how much you really need the audience and how much you're there for the audience and how much you're working with the audience as opposed to, like the being too hip for the room. And I also believe that if you continue to work and you continue to write, you continue to practice and hone your craft, you get better at being able to work any room, anywhere, anytime, and make any audience laugh, no matter how small or how big. You just become adaptive. Would you agree with that, Chris?
Yeah, I think so. Another thing, as far as the writing goes, you know, people always compliment he's a great writer, but sometimes it's the editing. It's what you don't say. And I find most beginning comics are a bit wordy, you know, and the exercise that I heard secondhand through Jay Leno was to write out your jokes longhand and then go back and cross out any unimportant words.
Yeah,
from the
trim all the fat.
You don't need any to cut off the fat, basically. Now, that works for me because I am a bit of a one-liner. So if you're a storyteller, you know, you could probably be a little bit, you know, more of a long-form person, but the payoff has to be you know, pretty substantial if you're going to, you know, bring an audience through 3 or 4 minutes before you get to the payoff. It's going to have to be a pretty big payoff. So, but yeah, but Doc said, write a notebook and then don't be afraid to practice in front of a mirror because you're going to have to spit these jokes out eventually. So, you know, when your wife and your kid are out, you know, look in front of the mirror and do your jokes in front of the mirror because you're going to have that familiarity. You don't want to go up there for the first time and try to craft the whole set by a bunch of jokes you haven't told before. So don't be afraid to practice in front of the mirror and maybe try to do the joke a couple of times and figure out where you want the audience to laugh too. You know, where's the punchline? You know, where are you going to deliver that as a punchline? And, you know, sometimes there's nothing there, but, you know, figure out where do you want the audience to laugh? I
think it's called a punchline for a reason too, because you usually want to, you want the punchline to have punch. You want to accent it in some way. So it's you use either your vocal tonality or your lack of vocal tonality in silence or pause by taking a beat or a split beat to indicate to the audience, this is a place where the punchline is and you should laugh. And, I know like Chris is talking about performing in front of a mirror. I think that's really good advice. And one of the reasons is, in my opinion, that when you perform in front of a mirror, you get good feedback about what you look like in addition to what you sound like. And you want your delivery to be in alignment. So you want the words you speak and the way you speak them to be in alignment with your body language, unless what you deliberately want, because it will help the joke, is for it to be out of alignment. And what I mean by that is, I'm thinking of a specific joke that I have, and it took me a while to craft it to be able to work. But the joke, I am portraying myself as a character, and that character is, we'll call them, they're not a reliable narrator. So what they're saying is not true, even though they're saying it as if it's true. And so there has to be a mismatch in the body language where it's like an actor acting a scene or portraying a character. The body language has to mismatch and the vocal tonality has to mismatch the actual scripted text of what the person is saying. And it adds more depth and texture to the joke and the punchline, in my opinion.
Yeah, there are some comics who do characters. I was never a character guy, but some comics are a lot more theatrical. You know,
Yeah.
I have a friend named Ryan Singer, and he commits to the bit, and it's a very physical bit. And I'm more of a punch and move kind of guy. You know, and yeah, he's one of those guys who will stay in character for a 5 or 6 minute bit, and it works for him. You know, he can pull it off, but that's a talent that I don't have.
Well, I love the monological style where you're there and it's premise, setup, punch, premise, setup, punch, premise, setup, punch, tag, call back, that kind of thing. There's so many different styles of stand-up comedy too, and I appreciate all of them. I know in the past.
Ben, who have you been watching recently that might make you laugh?
Boy, I have been watching. I don't know if you can classify as stand-up, but earlier this year there was a 2-part documentary on Steve Martin.
Oh yeah, great.
That came out, and I think this goes back to something we were talking before, or maybe we need to revisit actually. But I very much watched it as sort of the evolution of stand-up. His sort of going to universities and doing albums in the 70s, and then he just sort of pivoted into film. But it didn't seem like a lot of comedians were doing what he was doing at the time. Like there was nobody bigger in comedy than him.
Right,
at that
very
time.
Unique act, and he was always great on the panel. Like he'd go to on Carson or something, and he was always great in. I don't know if you ever seen the set he does on the Tonight Show for the Comedy for Dogs.
Yeah.
And when you say nobody was doing, I haven't seen anyone do something like that.
So, sort of things like that. My wife and I, we love, great. Now you're putting me on the spot, guys. Thanks a lot. This is just what I need today.
Well, I mean,
Take your time.
We all have people that kind of, you asked me initially who was the first person that kind of caught your attention. And I think we all have those moments of clarity where you're like, I really dig this,
I mean, I'll always love Seinfeld.
Yeah.
I love Jerry. He came out with a few specials recently, and to me, he's still got it. He's got that thing, and he's a bit of a character. And to your point before, Doc, I'll often kind of do my Seinfeld voice, right? With my wife or whatever, especially if I'm complaining about something. We're both partial to John Mulaney, and I feel like he's got a bit of a character, right, Chris?
Right.
Where
Sure.
he doesn't talk like that, with his parents. He's got sort of this thing that he does with his voice that some people, some friends of mine find irritating, and you get past it. And, watching him and his journey from SNL to kind of a bit of a downfall, right? Where he had to go to rehab, but then he came out with a special and was like brutally honest about it. I thought it was amazing. Making fun of himself and who he used to be and trying to get past it. So,
how often do you do I'm sure you have tons of comedy clubs there in LA. How often do you just go to a comedy club and watch a show?
I mean, back in the day, I used to do it quite a bit. I'm a little bit older and removed from those places, but back when I was in Hollywood, I would get, like one of the best shows I went to, because I knew their manager was the Smothers Brothers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And that was at the comedy club. And
what year was that?
Oh boy, that was probably 2006 or so.
Yeah. I did get to work with Pat Paulson once.
Really?
And
yeah, early 90s, and we did a tour through Kansas. A sweetheart of a guy. Great.
Wow.
Signed a book with my mom.
Yeah, that was a great show. I mean, I went there with, my roommate at the time, and we turned around, and there's Hugh Hefner with his 13 wives or whatever the heck he had at the time. It was just great. It was just great.
Hey, guys, I'm going to interrupt for just a second here. We're at halfway through the hour, just a little bit over, and I'm going to go to a station identification. We will be back shortly. Thank you, Ben, and thank you, Chris. Like I said, we'll be back in just a bit.
Keeping the First Amendment alive, we are Radio Fairfax, Fairfax County's public access and internet radio station.
Did you know that you can listen to Radio Fairfax on your smartphone, tablet, television, and many more internet-connected devices? Just download the TuneIn Radio app from your device's app store and search for Radio Fairfax. It's just that easy. The TuneIn app is available for iPhone, Android, BlackBerry, Windows Phone, and more. For more information, check out radiofairfax.org.
Hello, I am Dorian Saris, and we are listening to American Dreamtime, the Robert Doc Barham Show. Tell your friends to listen too. Thanks.
All right, and we are back. You are listening to American Dreamtime. I'm Robert Doc Barham with my good friend and co-host, Mr. Ben Cooke here. And today, thanks, Ben, we're talking with Chris Speyrer. Chris, you are a professional stand-up comedian, and you're also an owner of a stand-up comedy club, which is, tell us.
Mason City Limits Comedy Club.
And what's going on at your club coming up soon?
We have next week, this is kind of interesting. Next weekend, my headliner is a guy named Alex Ortiz, who is a former Chicago firefighter. We just had a family lose their house in a house fire about 2 miles down the road. So we're going to donate half the ticket sales to anybody that comes out. Going to invite, there was 4 or 5 districts that came to fight the fire, so trying to get those people out to support the family. It's a small community. So I thought that was a good opportunity to kind of throw a charity show together.
Excellent. So now you have had lots and lots of many, many well-known professional stand-up comedians. Where are things going with you and your club in the future? What sorts of plans do you have?
Well, I'm always kind of hustling to get an off-site show or two, either a satellite town or maybe a Friday to go with my Saturday, and I do an open mic here Friday just to sweeten the budget. If I have a special event, usually I'm doing some kind of door split. And if I can get something off-site that's maybe in a bigger venue with a bigger budget, it just might make a sense for those guys to do the club. If I have a little bit sweeter budget. And, another thing I learned from Lisa Grigsby used to run the Jokers Club in Dayton is I don't book very far ahead. I book about 2 or 3 months ahead because the special events are not going to book my room 8 or 10 months out. They got bigger fish to fry. But, hey, 2 or 3 months out, if you have a hole and it matches, it might make a lot more sense. So I'm usually kind of in that time frame as far as booking headliners.
There's about a quarter.
Yeah. So again, I like to keep my options open in case somebody is, somebody who I can usually has a bigger payday because hey, I'm going to be in the area. I need to fill this weekend. Oh yeah, I have it. And that's worked out quite a few times over the years. So I got to be a little bit more flexible than I think a bigger city club.
Ben. Can you hear?
Is Ben still there?
Okay.
Am I? Or any of us?
That's a philosophical question.
Hey, Chris, I have a question for you as well. And this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. And that is, at your club, do you find that and I'm asking deliberately leading questions here. So at your club, do you find that your audiences are, since you've been running this club for many, many years now, have the audiences become more comedy educated, so to speak? They become sharper audiences, more discerning?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think before the idea of going and watching, comedies on every channel now, but, back in the day, you had to go to a live show to see comedy, and to me, that experience is something I'm kind of in love with, the live event, and being in a room with a bunch of people laughing is so much more of the experience you want to have with comedy than watching it on TV, being in, and that's what I'm really trying to sell, that experience of being the live event and having a great audience, and an audience that appreciates what the comedian brings to the table.
Now, do you find that the crowds there, as far as content goes and the kind of material that they listen to, are they pretty open-minded?
Yeah, as long as I kind of let them know ahead of time, I've got my buddy Jeremy Nunez is going to be here the 28th of December. He's been on Dry Bar. He's a clean comic. And I want to make sure I reach out to those people, maybe in those communities that aren't here usually. Hey, this is a show that might be more up your alley. My buddy Will Durst is a political comic, been here many times. And, it's one of those things where he hits both sides, so it's not like a partisan show, but it's one of those things where it's not for everybody. So I would say political comedian Will Durst, and you might get the NASCAR fans might choose to come another weekend.
Well, now, who are the comedians, in your opinion, who really make the best use of the First Amendment freedom of expression? And when I say that, I don't mean that they are offensive per se. I'm not saying that's to me that's a overly simplistic way of looking at it, but really take advantage of the First Amendment of freedom of expression.
I think I mentioned the political comic Will Durst. Tim Slagle is another political comic, probably more. Durst is a Frisco guy, and I think Slagle's probably a bit more to the right of center. Durst a little bit more left of center, but both those guys explore those concepts quite a bit. Bill Burr, I think, does a really good job of taking a controversial subject. The one I remember is watching Oprah and her female guest, and she says, and he has the toughest job in the world. She's also a mother. And that's the premise. Oh, really? And that's something you shouldn't be talking about in polite society. Not only does he take on the subject, but he hits it out of the park, man. And it's a beautiful thing to watch. But his whole idea is, I thought being a ginger roofing in August might be a little tougher, but, any job you can do in your pajamas, it's one of those things where, again, in polite society, you're supposed to nod along, and he takes on those I don't know if they're sacred cows, but something you typically comics don't touch that subject, and he'll take the opposite view of it, and he'll hit it out of the park. He does that a lot.
I couldn't agree more, Chris. I'm recalling in the past couple of years, Bill Burr was hosting SNL, and his opening monologue was like a high wire act. It was
that's a good way to put it. A high wire act. Yeah.
He was like, I'm like watching, and this is still sort of on the edge of Me Too, and everyone's freaking out about cancel culture, etc. And he is like, I'm like, one false move, and he is plummeting to his death here. Because he is just, the subject matter he's talking about was so taboo. But the way he spoke about it, and I can't get into specifics, but the feeling of it was like I'm clenching my rear end listening to him in fear like I'm falling. I'm white knuckling through this thing, and he nailed it, and it was hilarious, and it was like, oh my God, I was like so nervous for him the whole time. It was like watching someone perform at the Olympics or something.
Yeah, now that he's established, he has an audience that they're coming to see him, and that's a point in your career, and I'm sure Doc and I aren't quite there. Where hey, if you're still in theaters, they're coming to see you. So you can be if they like you already and they're paying big money, they want to see you, and they're going to be a little bit more forgiving if you have an opinion one way or the other, but as long as you don't beat them over the head with it. But I mean, Bill Burr has established that persona, so people know. Like Jesselnick's another guy, where you're not going to have somebody stumble in to see Jesselnick go, I didn't know this is what he did. Now, come on, you know what he does because he's everywhere, and that's what his audience gravitates towards. So when you have that freedom to have that audience in front of you, you can get away with that a bit more easy than, if you're doing that 2 or 3 years in.
What else about the freedom of expression is appealing to you? That's really not meant to be a silly or simplistic.
Here's one thing that I had a conversation with somebody because I don't have any tattoos. And they're like, how come you don't have any tattoos? I'm like, well, your tattoos is a form of expression, correct? Oh, yeah, that means something to me. And I'm like, yeah, I'm a stand-up comic. I can express myself on stage, and that's the way I do it, So people can express themselves a whole lot of different ways, but I try not to judge people on those peripheral stuff, And but I felt judged that I didn't have any tattoos. I'm like, hey, man, I have a bad eye.
You felt judged that you didn't have tattoos.
Yeah, like I was like the only one in the. It was like a garage party,
I don't have any tattoos either, and mostly I think it's because I couldn't figure out what to commit to for the rest of my life.
Right. You don't want to have a tattoo when you're 18 and.
Either one of you guys has a tattoo?
No, I do not.
No.
I was wondering why. I felt superior to both of you right now.
How many do you have, Todd? What do you have? What's the over-under?
I have a tattoo on my left arm, on my forearm, and then one on my bicep that goes around it. It's a tribal tattoo. I actually went and got a tattoo. I completed a training. I was living in Haight-Ashbury in San Francisco, and so I went up the street. And I walked in and I had this symbol that was part of the training that I just completed. So I told the tattoo artist, I said, hey, would you put this on my forearm, on the underside of my forearm? And that way, when I put my arm out, someone who knows that symbol will actually be able to read it. And he said, sure. So I sat down in the chair and I got the tattoo and I went home with the bandage on my arm and I was all proud of it. It healed up. I took the bandage off and I went around the corner to this sliced pizza place. They make wonderful sliced pizza, and it was literally around the corner from me. And I walk in, order a slice of pizza. When they hand me the pizza, I reach up, and by the way, the folks who own the place, they were Chinese, and the symbol is a Chinese character. And and I reach up with my left arm. I'm proud of my new tattoo, and the woman who is one of the owners, she looks at me and she goes, "Oh, you know Ling Hao?" And I go, what? No, this is Ray Key. This is Ray Key. She goes, oh, no, it's Ling Hao. And so I take my pizza and I walk out the door. And as I'm eating my pizza, I head back to my place and I'm thinking, oh, my God, what have I got tattooed on my arm? Maybe I got the wrong symbol. Well, I got to go I have to go get another errand done that same day. So I walk around the corner, a block down the street. I walk into the dry cleaners to pick up my dry cleaning. And now I'm embarrassed to show my forearm because the folks who own and run the dry cleaners, they're Chinese as well. So I reach up to grab my dry cleaning and the woman goes, oh, you know Ling Hao? And I'm like, no, it's Reiki. It's Reiki. She goes, no, it's Ling Hao. And I go, no, it's Reiki. And she looks at me and she's totally serious. She looks me right in the eye and she goes, look, I Chinese, that Ling Hao. So as it turns out, it's actually pronounced differently in two different dialects of Chinese, apparently, as I understand it.
Seinfeld episode right there.
Yeah. So but I really am proud of my tattoo.
Do you guys ever wonder if Asians, go around getting English words tattooed on them?
Yeah.
Right.
My buddy,
baseball, hot dog, apple pie, Chevrolet.
Yeah. Or my buddy was going to get her done. Yeah. It's funny.
Yeah. Yeah, an Asian guy that has the word, pizza tattooed on his back or hamburger or something. Like, there was a big trend of this, I feel like, in the 90s, and that's probably where you fell in, Doc. With
well, girls are getting tattoos now, a lot more.
Yeah, I see lots of tattoos these days. In fact, I was.
Some are quite appropriate. Some of them put on their breasts. I just never looked at a pair of breasts and said, yeah, they're fine, but can we add a cartoon character? Kind of dragon, I never once.
So, Chris, when's the last time that you have been out to Los Angeles? Have you been there?
I did. I never lived there. I was able to be fortunate enough to work with a charity called the POMC, Parents of Murdered Children, and then later the Nicole Parker Foundation, which is a more specific example of POMC. So we did several shows out in LA that I was able to book. I performed on a couple, but we had some really big names. Paul Gilmartin helped me quite a bit on that.
That's very funny.
Billy Gardell pinch hit at the last minute on the first one, the second one, the improv. And my buddy Salim was working the door, so he introduced me to Rita Piazza, and I had trouble with the previous venue, and so we did about 4 or 5 there at the improv. That was right about when I was opening the club. So I did the first one, performed, and then I just kind of organized and booked the subsequent ones after that.
How about? Go ahead.
I really didn't perform much in LA. I did the Ice House at one time,
Yeah.
The Improv the other time, and then I did a casino in Palm Springs, and that's about my extent of performing in California.
What about Washington, D.C.? I'm in the Washington, D.C. area right now.
D.C. I got out there. I used to work for, I'm sure this name will ring a bell, Anita Fletcher.
Sure, yeah.
I remember, I knew her post Steve Fletcher, they got divorced, but she had gigs in Charlottesville, but Williamsburg, Richmond, and then she had the week down in Nags Head and the Outer Banks. So that's about the extent of my East Coast thing. I never got to D.C.
Well, if you are looking to come to Washington, D.C., or you do come to Washington, D.C., make sure you let me know in advance so that you and I can spend some time together. It'd be good to see you in person there.
Yeah, I did Baltimore a couple times where they had the Slapsticks there and they had the Comedy Factory Outlet.
Yeah, sure. Worked both of those rooms. Good clubs.
The only states I really haven't been to is that Upper East Coast, and a lot of the mountain ranges like Montana, Utah, Wyoming. But that Upper East Coast I never got to, and there's like 8 states in that little tiny area, so, I worked in 39 states so far.
Here's a question that's about an hour too late. How the heck do you two know each other?
From working together at comedy shows. So, again, we worked together. He would come through Dayton quite a bit. I was a Dayton, Ohio guy, so we had 2 clubs. Did you work Jokers the first time through, or Wiley's? Were you a Wiley's guy or Jokers guy?
I worked both Jokers and Wiley's many times. I recognize when you were talking about Lisa Grigsby earlier. I like both of those rooms very much. Pat Haney.
I'm very blessed to have 2 rooms in a town that size. And again, they showed the funny when the Jokers closed a while ago, but they had the Funny Bone there. Chappelle has a club now in Yellow Springs, which is about 30 miles outside of Dayton, and he owns the building that Wiley's is in, so he's going to redo that whole thing. And when that building first opened up, it was the whole ground floor was one big space. It was called Fifth Avenue. It was more of like a jazz club. But it sat like, from swanky joints. So when Wiley bought the building, he cut it in half to make it the comedy club, and he had a restaurant on the other side. And then eventually the radio stations took over most of it. And then Chappelle bought it. So I think he's going to gut the whole thing and make it a big, big venue again. Probably have some music there as well. And then he'll have some podcast stations up there because the radio stations used to be there. And he's going to do some Airbnb. So I think we'll have another club in Dayton eventually, but it's probably a year or so away. It's got a big project ahead of them.
Well, Chris, I just got a telepathic message from Ben, and we are coming to the top of the hour. Is there anything else, or what would you like to share before you take off today? that we haven't
Well,
talked about?
on the initial discussion about what we're going to talk about, you're talking about random acts of kindness and stuff like that.
Uh-huh.
And I was going to always suggest, I always take the steps. Because I used to work with a guy named Chris Fonseca. Chris, he's a guy in a wheelchair. He's got cerebral palsy. But so whenever I go to the mall and stuff, this is stuff I never really thought about. But he's a guy who has to use the elevator. You have so many healthy people who are going to go up one floor. And so he would just fight them. He would just push people out of the way to get on the elevator because he had no option. So I always tend to take the steps. Everywhere I go, I live above the club. Some people pay good money for a health club to do the steps, so I take advantage of that. Also, whenever I go to the grocery, I kind of park far away, kind of next to the cart. And whenever I'll offer to take somebody's cart in with me, instead of having a random cart outside. Because I saw this guy on YouTube, and he would kind of confront people, put a magnet on their car, and I'd much rather just approach them and say, "Hey, I'll take your cart in for you," things like that. Plus, I'm a healthy guy. I don't need to be fighting for the closest parking space. I need to let somebody who needs that space near the front door, and I can take a couple extra steps.
Hey, Ben, would you like to say goodbye for us today?
Chris, it was an absolute pleasure. Just in closing, if people are interested in finding out more about you, maybe why don't you drop them a website for us?
Well, our club is MC Limits, as in Mason City Limits, mclimits.com, and if you click on or /owner, it would be my bio. We have shows every weekend, Friday and Saturday, and in the summer we take a bit of a sabbatical, again, an abbreviated schedule. So I usually get out and do more shows at other clubs in the summertime. But we got we're very fortunate to have the lineup we do have coming up. I mentioned Chris Fonseca. He will be here in February for his first time. He's been on Letterman. His big credit, Doc, he was on an episode of Baywatch, and he handcuffed himself to Pamela Anderson.
Wonderful. That's our cue to exit. And hey,
she got away.
Hey,
Yeah.
Hey, Chris, listen, I also want to say thank you for inviting me to come and perform at your club. And guys, I had a lot of fun today. I am Robert Doc Barham, and you've been listening.
Ben Cooke.
That is Ben Cooke.
Thank you, Doc.
That's Chris Speyrer. And you guys have been listening to American Dream Time. Please tune in every Friday here on Radio Fairfax. Take care.